Hey there, Banditos. Welcome to the Wednesday episode of the Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Mike Farah, and today we have a colorist joining us. His name is Richard Isanove, and I know you know his work. He was instrumental in some big projects from Marvel in the past, Wolverine Origin, Neil Gaiman's 1602, and the adaptation of Stephen King's The Dark Tower. He has a very painterly style. He started training in film and animation in France and then California, and then started as a colorist at Top Cow. Did a lot of work at Marvel, still doing some work at Marvel, but now he is joined up with Joe Quesada's Amazing Comics, which launched last year at San Diego Comic-Con and is going to provide colors for the lead book, Disciple, and probably all the books that come after that. So be on the lookout for all of that, and let's get into it with Richard Isanove. Graham, Richard, how are you?
Very good, thank you. And you?
Very good. Glad to have you on the program, and we'll kick you off with the same question we ask all our guests, which is, how did you first discover comic books?
Well, that's kind of a two-pronged thing because I grew up in France and pretty much everybody reads comics there. You grew up reading Tintin and Asterix no matter what, you know.
Mhm.
My dad actually liked comics, and so he always brought some back home, and we pretty much, yeah, as far as I can remember, there was always comics around the house, but French ones, you know.
Yeah.
There was mostly this magazine called Pif Gadget, there was a few magazines, you know, they came out weekly and they had a bunch of stuff, and it was a few comic stories in it, like funny stories. There was always some more realistics in the middle, and my favorite character was Raon, which was drawn by this French guy, André Chéret. It's
Mhm.
Rahn. Actually, it's the red books behind me. That's the French edition, the collected of all the black and white versions of them. And and I loved the style. It was super dynamic, and already I was like the drawing style was, and it turned out that the guy was very influenced by American comics. I didn't know at the time, but that was really like the stuff I was gravitating towards. And then I think I was 8 years old, and my sister had to go to the hospital for a small benign operation, but I had to wait in the waiting room. So my dad took me to a store and said, okay, pick two comics, you know, to kill 4 hours. And I got one of those giant Scrooge stuff collection that they had. And then I just couldn't make up my mind. You know, there was so many magazines, like their magazine stores in France, they sell cigarettes and all these comics. And I kept going back and forth, said, okay, you got to pick something up. And there was this one book, and it was a French edition of Marvel Comics. It was called Strange, and they usually put like 4 stories in them. And the cover was Daredevil and Spider-Man jumping with a Namor at the back holding a tree up in the air. And I just bought it, and my dad, well, you want the stuff with the robot guys? But he just like the well, actually, sorry, I was just showing it to a friend, so I have it here. Sorry, wait a second. Yeah, that's what it looks like. That's actually the book that I saw on the thing. And what
Oh,
it was
wow.
that they had this French guy, Jean Frisano, who would actually take the American covers, paint them in this very realistic style, you know.
Mhm.
And I saw that, and I was hooked to American comics, which was not that common in France. It was still kind of still to this day, it's pretty marginal,
Yeah.
but it was really yeah, they came out monthly. They ended up they had like 3 different magazines with each one had 4 stories in them of American stuff, and it was, I mean, it had the Jim Starlin Captain Marvel was the first story that was in there. The final episode where he fights Thanos. Then you had
Right.
Daredevil, the Spider-Man, and the first episode with the Marauder, and uh, and Iron Man in there. And I mean, I had never seen anything like that, and I was just totally enthralled. And from then on, I was obsessed with American comics and mostly Marvel because DC was not really published in France, but the
Mhm.
Marvel stuff was yeah, that became. In 6th grade, they asked what I wanted to do, and in art class, and I said I want to be an inker at Marvel. So it was,
Wow.
so that was
Yeah.
pretty much
So you
it.
fell hard for the
Yeah,
comics right away.
I mean, I
Uh,
still love French comics and European ones. You know, Blueberry and Moebius. I mean, all this stuff really influenced me, but the American stuff was really my passion. It was always
Did France have a collector mentality at all, or was it really just sort of publications that you would read and then, wait for the next month? Did
Um,
anybody keep their comics around for any, like they do sort of in the United States?
Not, I mean, yeah, those people grew out of them. I just happened not to, But most of the time, it was funny. People kept them in a bathroom. I remember I had this
Okay,
friend,
right.
and he had this whole stack in a bathroom, and if there was one I hadn't had, I would shove it in my bag. But it was really, yeah. I don't think I didn't. I mean, some. I remember the big brother, a friend of mine, collected them, but most people would just read them as it went,
Hmm.
not, it was floppy, like, the French albums are, I mean, they call them albums. They're always hardcover,
Right.
larger formats. So the ones had dignity. The American one were just more like throwaway stuff that people would
Yeah,
look at and keep to the side. Yeah.
right. Um, that's why it's so difficult, I think, to find, comics from that era, American comics from that era, that are in good condition because
Yeah.
we're sort of made to be read and, thrown all over the place and read again.
No, the amount of people that, like older people that come and said, or even young, they said, oh, I used to have this huge collection and my parents threw them away when I went out of the house. That's probably the things I've heard the most in my
Yeah,
life.
right,
Between,
exactly.
that's, yeah, this whole pile of Strange, that was the name of the magazine, and my parents threw them away. It's,
Yeah.
oh,
It's
yeah.
a very common story.
Yeah.
So you said, at some point during, when you were a kid and asked what you wanted to do, you wanted to be an inker at Marvel Comics. But you eventually went on to do training and education in film and animation,
Yeah.
right? When you were, doing that schooling, were you really thinking that that would be the career, or did you think this was a one way to get back into
Um,
comics is by doing this?
uh, no, it was more like I didn't know how to get into comics, and there were film schools. And so I
That was the
figured
closest thing.
that was the closest thing, and I loved animation. I loved especially claymation, and I did my thesis movie in that. And I was just, it was just around the time when John Lasseter did his first movies, his shorts, and Aardman was doing claymation. So all this was really new and interesting. And I mean, I went to fine art school. Okay,
Mhm.
School is free in France, so it's kind of as long as you move forward, you can stay in school. So I stayed until I was 26. Just
Why not?
I did a minor, then I did a master's in Paris, and then I did an exchange to CalArts in California Institute of the Arts in LA. And yeah, but my I guess it was just a visible career. Like it seemed more plausible than getting into comics.
Yeah.
And I kind of, I didn't really think about comics. I always thought of doing them maybe on the side, but for fun, but never. So I got more into illustration and animation. And then actually, when I was at CalArts, a friend of mine did an internship at Wildstorm during the summer. He was from San Diego.
Yeah.
Then they split into, well, actually, it was Homage at the time, and they split into Wildstorm and Top Cow. And
Yeah.
Top Cow moved to Santa Monica, and they were looking for people. So I went, and Brian Haberlin saw my portfolio, and he hired me as a colorist. I wanted to be a penciler, but honestly, I hadn't focused on that. I was kind of more, and so he saw my paintings and my movies, which were in black and white, but still he he got me to try it as a colorist, and that's when I got there.
Had you been thinking at all about coloring as a discipline?
No, no, not at all. Actually, I was pretty close friend with my high school teacher. His son was in my class, and we remained friends through the years. So when he learned that I was a colorist, he actually laughed out loud. So that's how, because I really wasn't into it. But you had to take the classes. So I kind of had and it's more about modeling, really. How to light a figure and understand, and
Mhm.
that I knew how to do that from drawing and painting and all that. So it was kind of an easy skill to transfer. And then after that was Photoshop, and I worked with. Sorry, I'm very talkative, so you can stop me.
No, not at all. This is
But
what we're here for.
when we yeah, when we got to Top Cow, once again, Brian Haberlin, his stroke of genius was first to use Photoshop to color instead of the program that they were using that were vectorials, and you had to enter the CMYK values. That's what they were using at Malibu, that were very clumsy.
Hmm.
And so using Photoshop was really almost instinctive. And they had the first Wacom tablets too, where you could actually draw instead of using a mouse.
Yeah.
And also he hired mostly people like me, people that had an art background. There was illustrators, and most people there actually were painters and illustrators. So, and he figured it was easier to teach Photoshop to an artist than to teach a Photoshop technician to become an artist. And and it paid off because it was really um, the I mean it was like a pod, where we all grew so fast because there was like I mean was Steve Ferco, J.D. Smith, Dean White, Tyson Wangler, all these guys we all worked in the same room, and we just would, like we worked on the same book. There would be a color guide made with Sharpies, with markers
Right.
indicating the colors and lighting on each page. They would be put on a clipboard. You grab the page and you made a computer version of it. And so you had to translate this language into another one. And every time somebody figured something out, you roll your chair, said, "How the fuck did you do that?" And boom, they would show, they would show you. And then you go back, and then every time somebody figured out a trick, they would teach it to the whole crew. And and it was just, yeah, we learned at exponential speed, and everybody was just super. And we pulled. I mean, we had a mattress where we took turns sleeping on. The deadlines were just deadly, and it was just yeah, it was working around the clock, and it was really. But yeah, and also, I mean, so we had the room with the colorist, and next to us were the pencilers and inkers, and we had like these big windows that communicated that pretty much this big opening in the wall, so it was pretty much one big space. And you had Brandon Peterson, Joe Benitez, Mike Turner, David Finch. All these people were all in one room, and with Matt Benning, Dewey Tron, Aaron Soud. All these guys were like, and we spent the nights. Just every time you want to take a break, you'd go with the other guys. We'd all have dinner together, and it was really like very, very, very creative times, and a learning curve that was really incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sounds like a true, bullpen slash
Yeah.
studio situation where you're all sort of elbow to elbow working on books,
And then
which
you'd
must
have,
be different than, probably anything since then, I
oh
would
yeah,
imagine.
before and since. Yeah, since then I've been, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, more
Every
in
time
isolation.
I moved a
Yeah.
lot, but yeah, I'm always alone in my office. And I mean, I used to have a phone with headsets so I could walk around and talk to my friends, but that's pretty much been like that for the past 20 years now.
Yeah.
But and then, in the studio, you'd had Mark Silvestri. Of course, he had his office separate, but he'd come and work. He had his board, and he would come, and then suddenly he would show, David Finch had to do cross etchings, and everybody was like, and, I mean, Mark he's such a good artist. It's really incredible when you could see his pencils coming in, everybody's jaw would drop. It was just he I mean, really a very, very impressive artist. I'm a big fan of John Buscema and this type of drawing,
Yeah.
and he's
Yeah.
totally in the same lineage. And it was really like watching him draw was really incredible. It was anyway.
Yeah, no. I mean, sounds like a very special time, and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure you must have been, in heaven, just sort of
Mm.
working on comics and working with
Well,
such,
yeah.
talented people as well.
Well, yeah, and I would say, you'd have told the guy that lived in suburbs of Bordeaux that he would end up in Los Angeles doing comics, and also it was Third Street Promenade. I don't know if you know LA, but it's 3 blocks from the beach, and it's a pedestrian. It's a pedestrian street. No cars allowed. It's
Uh-huh.
so and, you'd see stars. Just I remember one night we to go. There was a shortcut from the parking lot to the street that went through our building. And at night, you'd have people knocking, and once there was Axl Rose, that wanted to go through, so you open the door for him, and you get, it was like I said, for me, it was such a different thing than what I had grew up with. It was really
Yeah.
cool. It's exhausting, but very cool.
Right. Well, I mean, do it while you're young, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But no, yeah, definitely used up my credit on of all-nighter when I was there.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I totally get that. So you were, as you said, new to coloring and new to working in the industry. Was there how you said you felt fairly comfortable from the beginning, but was there a time during that first year where you were like, I don't know if it's a specific issue or just maybe a few months in where you were like, I get this now. I feel like really comfortable. I can kind of knock out these coloring pages.
Yeah, there was, well, it took me about 3 months because I was new to Photoshop and I was kind of trying to still understand, and my brain hadn't really made the connection between my knowledge and the tool. And so
Yeah.
for 3 months, I was just looking what I was copying what other people were doing and using the techniques and really trying to look for a formula. And I remember I was working on a thing. I said, what am I doing? I know how to do this. And really, it's like, hey, this is like painting, but with another tool. So it took me being familiar enough with the tool, I guess, and being to the point where I could just go faster and just suddenly I realized, hey, I know how to do that. And so I started to be more free with my work. And still, the big switch too was when I worked with a guy named Ashby Manson, who was doing color guides. He was a colorist, but he was also doing color guides. But instead of using marker, he used watercolors. And so it was, very loose, but it
Hmm.
created, those what Bob Ross called the happy accidents,
Yeah.
when colors mix. And then I found it so interesting that I started to try to find a way to replicate this in a computer coloring. I found this weird color that would introduce by the stuff, and he really liked that I was doing that. So we started pretty much collaborating. And I think the first book I did by myself with him was the Garth Ennis Medieval Witchblade and Medieval Spawn.
Hmm. Yeah, I
That
remember
was
that.
so he did the guides for that, and we worked in tandem on that one, and that was very that was really like a big step forward for me. It was, and also at one point, Top Cow decided that there would be one colorist per book instead of sharing everything, because we started all to develop a different style, and it started to really show.
Yeah.
They decided, and we
Yeah.
started working with so yeah, so I got along with Brandon Peterson very well, so we decided we worked mostly. I became his colorist, and by that time, I was on a student visa.
Hmm.
And after, when you complete a cycle after CalArts, when you study in the US, you can have a 1 year practical training, they call it. And it's a 1 year temporary visa where it's like a green card, but for 1 year. And that year was reaching its end. And Brian Haberlin moved on to work for McFarlane on Spawn. And so they needed a new art director. And because I needed an official position to be, so I became the art director of the color department at Top Cow. And that's around the time, yeah, when everybody was assigned a book, and so I was coloring my book and kind of fixing up other books for continuity and doing special effects and things like that. So
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. What did art director entail that you weren't doing already? But it seems like it was still within the color realm, just sort of supervisory
yeah,
kind of
and
duties.
also, even though it was supposed to be one person per book, I mean, we were always late, so there was always at the end like 10 people who jump in to finish the five last pages. So I was kind of in charge of making sure that everything matched and
Yeah.
just was consistent. And there was still some books that were done by teams, but like I said, the books that were like JD Smith was doing Witchblade, and there was nothing to do, just to say thank you. And same thing for Darkness with Steve Furco, and there was all these books that were like, so it was, so yeah. Some cases I didn't have much to do, and some I had to just fix up and check the continuity pretty much, yeah,
Right.
and make sure that there were enough colorists. Pretty much run, also the personnel issue, make sure that the people came to help when we needed them and that stuff. But it was really, yeah,
Sometimes it's I think as a supervisor, especially in a creative field, it's good to know when not to do anything, when not to, that you're
yeah.
only
I
gonna
mean,
mess
when
it
you
up.
got,
This is all good. Like move on to something else.
well, especially when they're better than you, you're like, okay, that's fine. I'll take the credit, but I'll put my name as our director, but you did all the work. No, but it was, yeah, yeah. In those cases, it was just a title, but in other, like I said, it was still running the day to day, and honestly, I hated it. I hated having to deal with because there were some people that came in once in a while, and they like the very good people were already hired on a regular basis. So they were just coming in and out, and sometimes they were broke. But we had some high profile book, and I just could not put a second tier colorist on them. And having to tell the guys that no, we got nothing for you several times was a bit. I don't have the stomach for that. So,
Yeah.
so I would toss in a cover like, fuck, I'm gonna have to fix that. Sorry, can we swear here? Or
Right.
is it okay to swear, or should I watch my language?
No, go ahead.
Sorry,
We
but
only
yeah,
have to check a little. I always say we only have to check a little box on the episode to say the,
I'll be
explicit
careful.
language.
Sorry.
It's totally fine. I mean, I don't think many kids are listening to this, unfortunately. Uh, we
But
always like to have,
yeah.
a range of ages. But anyway, you did eventually. I do want to circle back actually to the watercolors at some point because I always find that fascinating because from what I can tell in my limited experience, they
Mhm.
really take on a life of their own. It's like it's just you barely have control over,
Right.
what you're doing there, and they can
Control
really,
chaos. Yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. But we can talk about that a little later. I wanted to know a little bit more about then after this experience at Top Cow. When did you start freelancing? And were you did you take basically anything that came in terms of assignments, or were you choosy about what you wanted to do?
Uh, yeah, well, I got married, so that allowed me to go freelance. I didn't have to be an employee anymore. And soon after, yeah, I decided to. I was already working from home at that point, coming in the office as little as possible. Uh, there's always office politics. There's always people that are there, and I couldn't deal with that. So I just was coming in as late as possible. Like usually, I would come in around 4, have an hour with the people in the office if I had to, and then work until 2 in the morning. And But after, yeah, no, I started working from home, and actually, just things like all those guys left actually Top Cat around the same time, and. And so it wasn't the same studio anymore. It was kind of coming in. It wasn't as fun, and so I started taking other work, and yeah, and actually it wasn't that easy at first. I did a bunch of Vampirella things. I even did some stuff for Bertucci, and then I and then actually it's Brandon Peterson who he was going to Marvel and to do an X-Men story, and he asked if I could come. Oh, actually, I did a thing for Awesome Comics actually, which was really cool. It's called The Glory. It was an 8-page story
Mhm.
by Brandon Peterson. It was written by Alan Moore, and I worked the crap out of that story. I mean, you get Alan Moore's script, and it's like 3 pages for 1 page, of script,
Right.
and the first page was in a bar, and he described the shelves behind the main character. So
Yeah.
you're talking
Yeah.
about one panel slightly larger than the other, and he described every object that was on that shelf. So, and Brandon, being anal retentive, drew everything that was on the thing. So the thing was full of details, and I just went and I had to put a highlight on every single one of them, and I think I worked on average 2 days, like 2 12-hour days on each page of those things. And and then the day I delivered the pages was the day Awesome went out of business. So, so it took years before that thing was finally published by when I fairly created the studio. But yeah, and so when Brandon moved to Marvel, yes, that I came, and but Liquid was already attached to the program to the project. Liquid Colors, they were the big people at the time,
Yeah.
and kind of setting the pace at Marvel. And so I couldn't do that project, but they felt bad. So they gave me another X-Men book, which was with Adam Kubert. So I was like, okay, not too bad.
Yeah. Not too
And
shabby.
actually it brings us back to the watercolors because it was X-Men 82, and it was a like Alice in Wonderland type of story. It took place in the Antarctic, and there was a mirror, and they literally went through the mirror, and they ended up in this kind of
I remember
spacey
this. Yeah.
universe when they were. And Adam wanted to do it with pencils, so he sent me those pages that were grayscale pencils, and I didn't want to do the regular coloring on them. So and you got to remember this is 98, 99, something like that. So technology was not exactly what it is now. And a color scanner was totally out of my price range and all that. So what I started doing was I faked watercolor. So I was making loose selection. And when you do watercolor, the pixels kind of gather on the edges. They kind of create a line on the edge. So with a tiny airbrush, I would go and through that ragged selection that I had made, kind of simulate the effect of where the colors would be more on the edges and in the center, as if it was a bubble of water.
Yeah.
I did the whole thing like this, and was after a while I got the knack of it, and it went pretty well, and Adam loved it, and then we started working together for the next I don't know 4 years. I think I did everything that Adam was doing, and in the meantime, that was just when Marvel Knight was starting,
Hmm.
and I was doing that stuff, and Brian Haberlin actually called me out one day and said, "Hey, we're doing these books for Joe Quesada, and he's really demanding, and he's driving our colorists nuts." So he had two books actually, one for Todd McFarlane, which was Medieval Spawn, and by Liam Sharp,
Yeah.
actually. And at the time, the movie had just come out. Spawn was the property to work on. And then he said, and or you can do that one, or you can do that stuff for Joe Quesada, and it was Daredevil. I'm like, man, I just really love Daredevil. Like I said, he was in that first book that I bought, and so I had to do it, and that's why I chose to do the Quesada's Daredevil. It was issue 5 of the Kevin Smith story arc.
Right.
And that was the first time I worked on it. I did a cover for 6 first, and then I worked on 5, and that was the death of Karen Page too. So my very first issue of Daredevil, I'm killing Karen Page. I was like, wow,
No
this was.
pressure.
I mean, it was, I was so excited about it. It was just working on Daredevil was so fun,
Yeah.
so that's how I
Wow.
started with him.
Yeah,
So
no, that's great. I love that you sort of innovated this new technique, and eventually it got, I think it got this name, unless I'm talking out of school, which is that instead of coloring, this was digital painting,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah,
and then you use that to great effect on huge
mm,
projects that came a little bit later. I mean, on the heels of the Daredevil and X-Men stuff, which is Wolverine Origin,
mm,
1602 by Neil Gaiman, and The Dark Tower,
yeah.
all of which were just, I mean, from a color perspective, from every perspective, blew people away. Um,
I think yeah.
how did you refine that, what you had started with that one X-Men issue into what became just, kind of a new style?
Well, it was, I mean, I got lucky, like I said, because Adam Kubert loved to experiment. And so I started doing these things where I did drops of paint that I would scan and then use as masks, and then use as selections to do painting effects on top of things. And he kept doing those. He loved, I mean, if you look at, we did Ultimate X-Men together, and every time there was a flashback, every time there was something, he was
Yeah,
always sending me those. Sometimes it was painted on orange paper with white highlights. He would do he likes to try different techniques.
right.
So he'd throw this stuff at me, and I would have to find a way to make it work. And I started, but the real turning point, and Joe was the same way too. I don't know if you remember the Echo, the David Mack
Yes.
storyline there. This one was a huge breakthrough too, because it was we had pretty much I had to they would talk about the layouts with David Mack, and Joe would draw the story, and I would get those pages that were half inked, half penciled, and he would send me uh, like some motifs that he wanted to incorporate in the background. And then I had David Mack's kabuki. I said, okay, it's got to look like this,
Yeah.
but with this. So I started using crayons technique. I mean, fake crayons. Find a
Yeah.
brush that kind of look like it. Scan things. I had this burnt effect paper. I was just trying to. I scanned some notepads and things, and it was just like this kind of multimedia stuff to
Yeah.
mimic what David Mack was doing. And
I
then
actually thought that was David Mack. I
yeah, no,
didn't
no, it was
realize that
really
that was you were
yeah,
doing.
yeah, no, it was really and actually I posted it on Instagram a couple months ago, but the first issue that I did, I made all the backgrounds continuing to the next page. Like so if you were to spread the whole thing, it's like one continuous image. I would take the page and put them side by side and then continue. It was like textured paper, then it was splatters and things like that. And so there's a couple black backgrounds and they kind of serve as a rest for me because it was getting pretty hard to keep it going. But yes, for the whole book, you can see that the background continues from one page to the next, and which was totally nobody noticed because once it's two pages at a time, you won't notice it. but it was an intellectual exercise, and for me, it was kind of, and it was, yeah, I just love. Said Joe and Adam are really like to experiment. They like when we did Father, the story that Joe Quesada drew and wrote. Years later, I said, "Okay, what do you want me to do?" He said, "I don't know, do something new." Okay, I guess. But it's kind of pushes you to try to invent new techniques or new ways to approach the medium. And as I went, I started to incorporate more real life paintings that I would do and scan and then colorize and this type of stuff. But to go back to Origin, it was kind of funny because I did. So Joe sent me this Spider-Man climbing a wall drawing. It was just a, a pencil drawing and a photo that he took out of his window of a wall. It was like an inside courtyard. He said, "Okay, do something with that." So I spent really 24 hours just redrawing every brick, everything, and then I colorized. And because every time I saw that, it didn't mesh. The language of the photography was always kind of slightly different from
Right.
the characters. And I wanted something that really seemed like it was one image. And it's then the movie came out and advertisement took a hold of that drawing and it became ubiquitous. It was like it's a very strong perspective of Spider-Man climbing towards us, and it's got I mean, I can send it to you if you want, but it's a very famous
I have it in my head. Is
oh,
it the
sorry.
ultimate
Yeah, it's the ultimate number one.
Spider-Man?
It's that one.
Yes, that's exactly the one I was thinking of. Yeah.
and uh and I did that, and it's everybody was super happy, and so was I. And Joe had just become editor-in-chief at the time, so we were talking. I said, "Hey, I really like that stuff. How about we do a whole book like this?" So you just pencil a page. I know you don't have much time, but you do 2 pages a month, and we have a book by the end of the year. And it's like, "Yeah, I always wanted to do Captain America. Let me think about it." And then 2 days later, he said, "Okay, we got this project coming up, and maybe it would be a cool idea to do it that way." And it was Wolverine Origin. And then um, Andy's pencil came in and they were much more rough, and they had these kind of etchings that he was doing to do the gray tones.
Yeah.
So I knew the hyper realistic style wouldn't really work, but I started to work off of that and developing kind of a brush strokes that would kind of match it. And we did a few tryouts, and actually Bill Jemas didn't want to do it. He wanted it, he said, "It's our biggest book of the year. It's got to be inked. We got to go," he didn't want to take the risk. And then I sent in a couple of pages and he said, "Okay, that looks good." And and then they went for it. And yeah, and that was really, for me, that was such a stepping stone. It was really like I felt I had moved up with Ultimate X-Men, but this was really what got my work noticed, and it was very cool.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I think you sort of made a name for yourself with that book and then the, subsequent other big projects. You must have been at that time, not that you weren't now, but very so in demand. People must have been looking at you and being like, look at what he's doing for these books. Um,
um,
or is that not the case?
I mean, I never heard for work, but I never really. Everybody thought I was exclusive to Marvel, which I never was, but they just gave me enough work that I didn't have to look anywhere else.
Yeah,
So I kind of like I just went along with it. I knew that because I had worked with Joe before and I knew he liked my work, I was always kind of offered whole project. So I just kept my head down and gave whatever they gave and did whatever they gave me, And the only time was when I can't, when was that? Actually, it must have been just before I started 1602, when I'm a huge Barry Windsor Smith fan, and especially a huge fan of Conan the Barbarian. I discovered the John Buscema Alcala black and white ones when I was same thing just a couple of years after I found out Marvel Comics, and that just blew my socks off. That it was like etchings, and the whole thing. Conan, I actually wrote my thesis on Robert Howard and Conan when I was in
Cool.
college.
Yeah.
uh, and so Dark Horse was reprinting and recoloring the Red Nails, which I used to have as a kid. And I actually, that's the only time I contacted an editor and said, "Hey, can I color this?" And they had lower rates and stuff. So that's cool. I just want to do it. And the problem is that's just as I was starting it, they gave me 1602, so I had to drop out, but I just did the first issue for them. And then after that, I had to bow out. But I think that's one of the rare time when I actually contacted an editor to do something. The rest of the time, they just kept me busy. And if there was a gap, if they forgot about me, I kind of also became associated with limited series. Like I would do like
Okay.
so sometimes they will, okay, I need a project now to it would be nice to have a monthly thing going on. So that's how I ended up. I did some runs on Ultimate Spider-Man and things like that, just in between projects. But yeah, and uh, yeah, 1602 was really fun too. Uh, just sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no. I mean, you can certainly keep going. It sounds like that you were happy to um adapt to whatever assignments were given to you. Were there any that were you trying to seek out any particular projects or artists to work with?
Um,
Those that obviously that are more experimental seem to be,
yeah.
simpatico with you.
Well, I can't really name names, but um, I mean, there are some artists that I had to work with that I really was not happy because they were not. Okay, uh, I like working with great artists because that makes me look better in the end. It's easier
Sure.
if you start that to get there than if you start there. So
Right, right.
and it's mostly people that have a great sense of light. They because my work is like to add the shadows and the lighting and stuff. So if they already have a strong light, you just have to build up on that. And some people are great with anatomy or storytelling, but their light really isn't coherent. And so once you make it obvious that the light is coming from the left and you get everything lit from the left, but then the body is from the right for some reason, and it happens, when you draw, you kind of go on automatic and you kind of lose sight of things. But it makes my job super complicated because where I was supposed to put the highlight, suddenly there's a shadow. It's like, what am I going to do? So you got to find ways to justify it and work around it.
I see.
And it makes life difficult. And there are some guys that are just, and actually and I'm also very partial to one light with sometimes a secondary light on things, but I like when they have a very strong one directional light with strong shadows so we can really build a very like a more natural looking thing. And that's why I hadn't had when I studied well sorry rewind a little bit, but I remember so I'm a huge fan of Stephen King.
Mhm.
And I remember I was listening to a short story and I was talking to Joe Quesada and I said, "Man, haven't you guys asked Stephen King to do something? He started, when he writes, it's so visual."
Yeah,
And he said, "Yeah, we tried, but he decided to retire after his accident. It was the early 2000, and
I
he
remember
just
that.
at this point he announced that he was just going to finish the Dark Tower and that was it." And I was like, okay, too bad. And then maybe 2 months later, somebody at Capo Joe, at a convention asked Joe who he would like to work with. And he said, "No, we love Stephen King, but, he decided to retire." And that came back to his agent who told Stephen King and said, "Okay, yeah, let's do something for Marvel." And that's when they decided to do The Stand and The Dark Tower. And so Joe tells me, so you're Stephen King fan, right? So, yeah. And I looked behind me, and I used to have books on tapes, and like half of them were Stephen King books, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And I literally spun on my chair when he told me, you know, I was on the phone, and I just spun around, and then I just and he said, yeah, well, we got to do a tryout because Jay, you know, he usually has his stuff when he inks himself, and then his wife colors him. But I wanted to see what you could do with it. And so he sent me the pencils of the first page, and it was um, I've compared it before to that, but it was like you're climbing a mountain, and every time you reach, there's a right stone that's exactly where you want, you know. And his stuff was just like that. I could just right away, everything was in place because his sense of light and volume is so strong,
Yeah.
and you just have to fill in the blanks. It's just like so. I mean, it totally leads itself to what I was doing, and it was just like working with a long lost twin or something.
Yeah.
It was just really right away, and you know, so he was kind of Jay was like, yeah, okay, sure, try out, and then I sent the page, said, okay, we're doing it that way, and and that was it, and that was really cool because
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I would have really hated to lose that project, and
No kidding. I mean, it
uh,
looked phenomenal.
thank
It
you.
really did. I mean,
I mean, yeah, it
no
was.
joke to say it hit. I felt at that point like new heights of, what a comic book or a graphic, adaptation could look like. And I
And
would
he was
imagine,
very picky too. He's super
yeah,
picky about what he
yeah,
wants. So he really pushed me to do things. He told me what he didn't like. Like I used a canvas texture that I had scanned. I had done some paintings on it and scanned, and I used that in the backgrounds of Origin, and also I used that to like if you look at a painting on canvas, you can do you have the deep colors, you know, that go between the threads, but then with a dry brush, you can go on it and kind of creates a pattern, you know, of
just on
two
the
colors
surface
superimposed
parts.
on top of each
Yeah,
other. And I always like that effect of having the colors kind of both colors at the same time, but not
right.
mixed. And so that's why I did that on on Origin to kind of create like yeah, all these templates that were kind of on top of the etchings and all it. It was kind of these mixtures of textures. Plus, also I used a lot of toothbrush splatters. I
Yes.
scanned some toothbrush splatters, and then I was using that as selection to do my effect on their different densities and things. And so yeah, with so so yeah, so Jay said he hated that, so I had to find another way to fill in the backgrounds. And his backgrounds are very open. So
Yes.
I started doing gradients, and then with the on Photoshop there's a finger. Like you can, it's like a, you know, like it's a push tool, I don't know, it's a finger tool, and it kind of pushes the colors a little bit like this.
Oh
And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
how
yeah. I know what you're talking about.
I started doing clouds that way by pushing and just making these things, and then it became 50% of the book is skies and clouds. So I kind of started to and the hard part was not repeating myself because every I tried to not through the whole JD arc, I tried to never repeat the sky twice. Like each scene had to have its individual sky, you know. So I would establish a color scheme that would be peculiar to this one, and it was very so because it usually figures on empty background, so much, and you know the world of the Dark Tower is a world that's falling apart, so I would still do these thin splatters everywhere, kind of dust floating in the air. So it was all smog and dust pretty much for the whole book. And I kind of started doing that thing when I would read the scene and try to do color gradients kind of randomly until I felt like I remember especially there was a scene in a factory where people were like it was so toxic that people were dying from breathing it, and I just kept adding like greens and purple and things just until I get a thing that just looking at it I felt like throwing up, and it was harmonious but it felt like dirt, you know. And so
Yeah.
so that's right when that kind of how I approach the stuff, you know, kind of, oh, this makes me happy, so I would try to find colors that made me happy, and through the whole thing, so I would start by doing this background and then go back and integrate the figures into it with this, put the line art on top of it, and then start painting the stuff. And it was, yeah. I mean, honestly, I worked on that. I worked almost 8 years on the Dark Tower. We did 60 issues, half of them with Jay, and after that with rotating artists. And actually, I filled in for 12 issues, I actually did drawing and color on those. And like Jay needed to take a break. And yeah, that was the uh, yeah, yeah, Jay was not, he's not a monthly artist, so he kind of kept it up as much as he could. But there was a point where, um, and so they asked me to do a fill-in issue. So I did one. It was like the story seen from the point of view of the bad guy of uh, of Randall Flagg,
Yeah.
and it was called The Sorcerer. It was supposed to be a one shot, so I did that, and I busted my hump on that. I just worked on every panel. It was 26 pages, and I just, I finished it. I'm like, wow, I'm really proud of the book. And then I get the script for the next issue. I said, what's that about? I said, oh yeah, no, we decided he's going to take the whole story arc off, so we're going to do the rest of the story arc. And by then we had caught up with a monthly schedule because we took a month off between each story arc. But by then I had taken 2 months on this one, so it was time to start right away. So right away I had to do that on a monthly basis, and that was rough because I had to draw, to color and everything, and I gained like 10 pounds in 6 months, and I was just sleeping in my chair and doing all this stuff. But it was really yeah, it was very exciting. I mean, that was always my dream. I had drawn a couple short stories a few years earlier for X-Men Unlimited, and done a few covers, but that's the first time I actually had like a regular job
Yeah.
of doing the whole thing. And it's not very good for your health because I'm not super fast. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I want to say my average day was 12 to 16 hours, just at my desk. I had this chair at the time that could lean almost horizontally, like, and it was still, so I would actually, when I was exhausted, I would just tilt it back and then sleep for 10 minutes and just jump back and go back to work. Yeah, I mean, it was fun. I learned a lot, and, yeah, it was fun.
I was going
Yeah.
to ask you about your, illustration work because you have done it here and there over your career, but not something that you sort of like totally, delved into. And now I can understand, especially because I would imagine that when you're doing the illustration, you also have, because of your coloring background, a vision for how it's going to be colored. So you automatically double your work because you're always going to be illustrating and coloring, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I have to prove myself as a penciler, and also I have to keep it up as a colorist afterwards, which is actually very hard because I usually see other people's work and I try to see, okay, here's what they give me. I have to understand what they're doing, and then I got to do. I always try to give more than what they expect, and but with me, I'm expecting something already, so it's kind of hard to add that plus,
Yeah.
that I try to add to other people's work. So it's yeah, but I mean, I've done a lot of covers for Dynamite. I did a lot of things for Red Sonja. I did a whole bunch of
Yeah.
covers for that, and also, well, I did actually a short story before they gave me Sorcerer. They had me do a tryout on. It was for a book that was it was Assistant Editors Month, and they each had to choose a character. There was like four or
Okay.
five associate editor, and they helped. And mine, she was the editor on Dark Tower at the time, and she asked for me to do it. And it was American Eagle. It was written by Jason Aaron, and it
Yeah.
was like a
Yeah.
short story. It was pretty fun. It was really it was, and I did it in the style of Jay because they wanted a graphic continuity. So I used those very hard shadows and and it was fun. And it's actually, do you know the show Dark Wind? It takes place on a reservation.
I've
It's on
heard of it.
AMC.
I've not seen it, but I have heard of it.
It's
Yeah.
great. It's based on I say Tony Hillman's novels. It's a cop on a reservation, and but the opening scene is a guy digging a grave, and it's with the sherry standing next to it, and it's actually the opening scene of our book too, which also takes place on a reservation. So I guess it was the
Nice.
classic of the genre, but uh, yeah, it's yeah. So and yeah, I did a short story. Yeah, I really actually, yeah, at the time I kind of forced my way into an X-Men Unlimited. Uh, Back in 2001, I really said, okay, I gotta draw something. And it's just as I started it, my father got sick, and I had to go to France to be with him, and he died just while I was there. So I ended up kind of messing up, being late, and having to rush it to finish it at the end afterwards, And so that kind of killed my credibility as a penciler. I mean,
Yeah.
they were super nice about it and all that, but I couldn't even deliver 8 pages on time, so that kind of made me. And I was slow. I'm not gonna make excuses. It was a hard time, but also I was taking way too much on it, and I was just second guessing myself. And honestly, I see the work and it's competent, but it's really not very good. So just it definitely was not what I had in mind, and I got better, with time, and
Yeah.
I yes, I did those two stints on the after. So I did the fifth hardcover during the JE run, and also did the last of the series of Dark Tower, which was called Last Shots, and it was a bunch of individual stories. It was four, well, four or five, I can't remember. No, it was two parters and one individual story, and they were actually really cool. They were kind of apocryphal stories. Robin Firth, the writer, like Stephen King did synopsis of what he wanted in a book, and then his assistant Robin kind of took over, and she kind of fleshed out the stories. And it was I don't know how much you want me to elaborate on that, but it was really cool because she wrote in she started to write more in comic books form, but at first she was writing kind of novellas. Like
Yeah.
it was cut in like scene one, and then she would describe the scene with the dialogues in it, but more long form. So to adapt to that was really great because you had total freedom of,
To
how
lay
to
it out.
lay
Yeah.
out stuff like that. And Jay had kind of set up that look of big spreads. So you had to, okay,
Right.
find the 2, 3 spreads that would fit in a story. And then coming from the one thing I got from my background in film and animation was storytelling. I knew I wasn't the craftsman that Jay was, but I felt I could compensate with storytelling because I had done so much storyboard and all that stuff that I could really, so I really focused on that, in those things, trying to make the story as fun and compelling through visuals. And Robin was really great to collaborate with. Like I had some ideas, and she said, "Yeah, go for it." There was um, there was a couple of times where character got killed, like she would write the story and he shoots him in the face. I'm like, can we make that last a little bit? And and
Yeah.
so I like during like a 4-page fight instead of just a shot in the face and squeezing things and move things to the next episodes. There would be more room to breathe for action stuff. No, it was really cool. So I actually got to kind of write a little bit, little
Yeah.
scenes or rewrite, and I mean with her approval every time. She supervised, but it was and yeah, and you kind of start to put little visual ideas in the stuff. It was a very cool way to work. I really enjoyed it.
Would you like to have more of those kind of opportunities to do sort of collaborative storytelling work? I mean, it sounds a little bit more like Marvel method, that classic
Yeah.
Marvel method of,
Mhm.
writing out a little bit of the story and letting the artist kind of do the actual layout and storytelling.
Yeah, oh, no, oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, for me, it was really the best experience in that aspect. And well, then I I did a couple of things after so I did these things, and I asked for more um, drawing assignment, and I did the Spider-Man Noir. We did
Okay.
it was the beginning of the Spider-Verse. It was Prelude to Spider-Verse, something like that. And they
Yeah.
had Spider-Man Noir, they had Spider-Gwen, and a third story, I can't remember what, but there were like 3 books that were the prelude to the big Spider-Verse thing, that event. And that was cool because I also know the writer is Fabrice Sapolsky. He was a French guy that I've known. He was the specialist of American comics in France. He had a magazine, and now he's a writer, and he has his own imprint, and he does all the convention. He's very prolific, but yeah, he created Spider-Man Noir, and he was writing that, so it was kind of fun to work with him, and I love that period, the 30s. It was really fun to work with those things. I have a lot of props and things that I use for my photo refs. And so I drew that one. Then I did, and then I was supposed to do a Savage Wolverine, and and they had a writer assigned to it, but then he dropped out at the last minute. And it was scheduled to be Jock was doing the next. Savage Wolverine was like a collection of short of
Yeah.
6 stories. Frank Cho did the first one, and then so Jock was doing the one before me, and so when the writer dropped off, I remember the editor called me and said, "Yeah, sorry. So do you have anybody you'd like to work with?" And she started throwing names and so you can do it yourself. I'm like, yeah, I'll do that. And I said, "Oh, really? Yeah." And then so I ended up being able to write and draw the Savage Wolverine story, which was I mean, that thing was really funny because that editor actually got pregnant, and I mean, she was actually pregnant, and it was her last month before taking maternity leave. So I think each issue had a different editor that had no idea what the story was about, and it was not it was not a major book, so it was
Sure.
kind of being sent out. And so there was a little summary at the beginning that had nothing to do with the story. Like at one point, he goes through a town, say, "What is the mystery of?" I can't remember which city it was. Yeah, that was the first episode. They left right away, but okay. And but the funny thing was that I was working with her with that first editor, and she and said, "Oh, it's a noir story stuff, so we should like capitalize on the fact, like let's make we should do like an old type of comic book with lots of copy on it, and so yeah, like funny stuff, find out the mystery or whatever, and then
Right.
from Riches Enough, the master of noir." And we thought it was a joke, but it's the only thing she left in her notes. So when a book came out, it says from Master of Noir, Richard Isanove, when I hadn't written anything to that point. But that's the only thing that survived, and it was on the cover. So what is that? I thought, never mind. It was supposed to be a joke, but that totally lost in the translation. But sorry, I'm
Well,
officially the Master of Noir.
yeah, I was gonna say now you have a new title. You know.
Yeah, my son gave me a Funko of me, and on
Did it
it
say
says
Master of
Master of
Noir?
Noir. Yeah,
That's awesome.
exactly. But
That's fun. I wanted to turn to what I think is your latest project, but what was just announced at San Diego Comic-Con, which is under Joe Quesada's new imprint or new company called
yeah.
Amazing Comics, and
Mhm.
you are going to be on the first project out of that, right? Which is called
Yep.
Disciple.
It's called. Oh,
Can you tell
yeah.
me a little bit about how that all came together? When did Joe approach you about this whole new project?
Well, I think it was something that after he left Marvel, he kind of was wondering what to do for a little bit, and he met Charles Dorfman, yeah, who's an English writer. He's written The Lost Daughter, and he produced The King's Speech a few years back, and he actually directed a movie called Barbarians, uh, which is not the horror one with the people in the basement. It's another horror one with people from the woods. But but
Not one horror, the other horror. Yeah,
put an S at the end.
right.
But and so they met and they kind of came up with this idea of it's it's Hamlet. It's the youth of Hamlet, and he's part of a. Instead of being a prince, he's the heir of a league of assassins, and it's got magic. It's got a little bit of everything, and I guess Charles wanted to kind of had the idea for the story, and he met Joe, and they started talking, and they decided to do that, and Joe he has been working on several other things that he was developing, different ideas and I always kind of color them, create kind of a look, like he's done like 3 or 4 pages of a project, then another, and every time say, "Hey, can you do that?" So I do it, and and uh, and then yeah, this one is actually the first one that's coming to fruition. I don't know if we're gonna resuscitate the other ones once that is done, or if it's gonna be. Right now, it's just starting. There's going to be other books. We don't know exactly what shape it's going to take, but for now, it's starting with this one. There was a preview, yeah, at San Diego of the first 12 pages, and the first 6 are colored, and the other one are black and white because I mean, he's I know I'm not. I feel like I'm advertising the book, but he's really at the top of
That's
the
okay
game
to
still.
do.
I think he's really been working. He's um, he's kind of obsessive when he works. he's it's kind of like Jay. Actually, they're really guys that just can't let go until they feel it's perfect, and
Yeah.
it's so it always puts a lot of pressure on me because usually they kind of push to the last minute because they want to fine tune that little face in the background, So it's like I gotta color it, but once again, he's a strong artist, so if I have to go fast, I can because everything is where it should be. I don't have to work around the drawing, I just work with it, and once again, he said do something different. So I just I this one is actually fully painted on paper.
Wow.
I just I decided to. I'm also a bit tired of always working in front of the computer, so so what I do is I went old school. Actually, I think yeah, there we go. Let's have the cover here. So that's the watercolor painting of the cover. Then I scan
Wow.
it. I just realign it with the line art, and I do the glows and stuff like that. And I fine tune it if I messed up a little bit. But overall, it's so yeah, it's been kind of interesting, very time consuming, but it's also very fun to go back to my original training, I guess. To
Yeah, you're rediscovering some of your
yeah
original, you know, discipline, I guess. When was the
yeah
last time you did this kind of work on paper?
well, I do when I do signings, at conventions, I
Yeah.
usually do watercolors. So I kind of
Oh, okay.
actually it's funny because I used to just do drawings. I had a couple faces of Wolverine and things that I could do
Right.
pretty fast. But then I was in Angoulême, the French festival, and I was signing next to Olivier Coipel, and he's right next to me doing Michelangelo's work next to me, like he's doing a four figures of a cyclops with things, and I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
doing my little faces. So I felt people were getting a little ripped off. So at lunch break, I went and I bought some watercolors, and that's the first time I actually did. Probably in probably 10 years by then that I had left school. That was the first time I actually grabbed real watercolors and started working. And yeah, it's kind of cool. It's like I said, it's can be chaotic, but it always kind of looks cool no matter what. You do some splatters here and there, and it looks like you
Right.
know what you're doing. So I just so ever since that, I've been kind of working on it. And every time I do signings, it's watercolors. So it's kind of like and if you do a French festival, that's boot camp because you sign for free there. You're
Mm,
just it's purely promotional. So
right.
you have a line of people, and I would do I don't know 12 or 15 full
Wow.
drawings a day. Of just like a four figure with watercolors and with people waiting, looking at you, so you can't mess up. And it's so yeah, very long days of watercolor, and it's very good training.
All right, we are back. What did you guys think? I had a great time talking to Richard. It's always interesting to hear from folks that are not necessarily the prime creators, so to speak. So those that are not writing or drawing, although he's done a little bit of both of that as well. But I love his perspective on the industry, on coloring and his own projects. And I can't wait to see what he and Joe Quesada have come up with from amazing comics. I'm looking forward to Disciple and all the other titles that come out of it. So, Richard, thanks for being on the show. Everybody out there, thank you for listening. Thank you for viewing. Thank you for rating, reviewing, subscribing, pushing this show to as many ear holes as possible. That'll do it for today's episode. We'll see you again on Friday. Peace.